Everybody, welcome back to Tag Team, the Pokemon Trading Card Games premier podcasting duo. My name is Riley Holbert, joined by my good friend JW Kriwal. JW, how's it hanging?
It's hanging pretty well. I got some new blue light glasses, which my wife is very excited about. They're from Diff. The maker is Diff. And apparently that's like the Toms of glasses because they give a pair for every and so you may know my wife is like a super big Craigslister, Facebook marketplacer, and so she got these glasses for an insane deal when they normally retail for like $80. She was telling me. Nice. Got them for $15, so pretty cool.
Nice. Do you feel the difference when you're looking at screens?
I do. I had been wearing these blue light glasses, but she said they were ungainly. Definitely very orange, and they kind of are some. I don't know. I look like Dr. Disrespect or something like that. But
yeah, it
spans the mustache.
Leans a little bit into the gamer zone.
I definitely a huge game. If I want to be a gamer, I wear these, and then if I want to be, an insightful hipster, then I wear these.
Do they have similar levels of efficacy? Do you feel like they prevent the strain in about equal amounts, or is one better or worse?
I would just say that since it's a change of color, probably the other one feels a little bit different because it also dims a little bit. The orange color dims, but I mean it's fine. I definitely do feel a difference just whether I wear these glasses or the other ones. Just knowing that I can look at screens a little bit more safely.
Do you sleep better after looking at screens when you use these?
I actually had been, before I got the orange glasses, which were maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was finding I was getting kind of eye spasms. And then I attributed it, because I was looking at a computer screen or something for most of the day. I attributed it to the blue light from the computer. And since getting a pair of glasses, I haven't noticed the twitch, so that must have been it. I've been cured.
I know I have trouble falling asleep when I'm using my phone without the night shift is a good example. If I'm lying in bed just scrolling through my phone, if I'm using blue light, then I'm much more likely to stay awake than if I'm on the night shift thing on the iPhone. So
no, I definitely noticed that too, but I always have used Twilight or some other similar app.
Kind
of get rid of that blue
light. I used
to
use Flux on my computer. But then I start whenever I do graphic design stuff, you have to turn off Flux because your sense of the colors is going to be off to what's actually on the screen.
Right.
So I ended up just stop using Flux, but it's a good piece of software.
Right, for sure.
Kind of emulates the same effect, right?
Yeah.
But based on the time of day. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of computers, lately the world of online TCG has really been expanding. People have truly forayed into the magical realm that is Tabletop Simulator. I feel like every day I see another YouTuber trying to make a tutorial on how to do Tabletop Simulator. I don't know what the deal with that is. I guess they're just trying to hop on the trend.
Sure.
I mean, it's still Tabletop Simulator, takes some getting used to. I feel like once you actually get used to it, it actually feels like a pretty passable way to play a card game.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I think the kind of onboarding is a little bit difficult for some people.
Yeah.
But like you said, as soon as you get used to the mechanics, you kind of see these certain things that, okay, this makes sense because I've already used it in this application. And then if I do it here, then then that, I've used this already to try to do this effect, but then it's very applicable over here. And so I think just the onboarding is very difficult. But as soon as you get into it, as soon as you get in a flow, it's a really nice program.
Yeah. I think that the place where Tabletop Sim falters right now, at least for Pokemon cards, I think as a program, it actually does its job phenomenally well. But specifically for Pokemon cards, I think where it struggles is with weird Pokemon cards like Marnie that require this very odd set of actions. Even within a physical realm, it's odd to do Marnie.
Yeah.
it's not a natural thing.
It definitely isn't. Yeah, I remember playing, back when we had physical card tournaments, playing the Marnie, and you're trying to pick up your deck, and maybe you don't pick up the whole deck, and then you got
Yeah,
cards like
it's just a
flying
mess,
around,
man.
and
It's just a
or you
mess.
like forget to offer your
Your
shuffle to
hand to
the
cut, yeah.
opponent, and it's just all this awkward stuff.
Yeah, so like that part I understand. The other
Yeah,
area, so like any weird Pokemon card interaction that's just like very non-traditional like that.
yeah,
The other area where I've seen difficulty is just with like energy specifically, or like things that get attached to Pokemon. It's like
yeah,
hard to stack them quite right.
yeah,
It's like an art, and you get used to it. Um,
yeah, for sure.
I wish someone would, and I've thought about doing this myself. I think I mentioned this last week. Of like maybe I just told this to Andrew, but I have thought about just as like a programming exercise to like try and do a mod for
Do a
it.
script.
Yeah, I just don't have the time.
Yeah.
We're doing the cast a little bit early today, and I left work really late, so like I really got home about like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, regardless, I think it's more than passable, and I think that's kind of the foundation right now. We've had so many formats now where people have done ridiculous stuff to try and do formats before they come to TCGO.
Mm-hmm.
We do Skype sessions, we do like TCG1, which that's probably my least favorite mechanism. Like all this kind of crazy stuff. And I think tabletop sim almost seems to be like the final form of that.
Right. Absolutely. So. Absolutely. Now, Riley, from a viewer perspective, how do you feel like Tabletop Simulator, compares to a real game of Pokemon? I mean, obviously it's worse, but how much worse?
Like a real life game of Pokemon?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the most exciting way to watch Pokemon is actually just TCGO. Like, you have animations, and like the movements are very smooth. I think there are notable pros and cons to Tabletop Simulator. I think overall it's like a worse experience than like a traditional experience, just because I don't know, maybe that's just like nostalgia, almost like an enjoyment of the physicality of cards. That's part of the reason I like card games in general, to be honest. Is like the physicality of holding cards and moving them around and doing stuff with them.
For sure.
So that being said, I think there's some notable pros and cons. You lose out on some of like the player feeling, I guess, where you have like physical people moving stuff around and interacting with cards, but you gain efficiency, at least in some areas. Like shuffling is so streamlined, and that's really the benefit of any online tool, is that shuffling is streamlined, which is the most time consuming part of any card game, is the shuffling, especially in one like Pokemon where you shuffle a lot.
Yes.
Not every TCG shuffles as much as Pokemon. Pokemon shuffles an exceptionally large amount of times in a turn.
That's right.
So
that's right.
Having it streamlined is actually really nice. I think on the whole, I wasn't sure what I would feel about Tabletop Simulator and like watching it. I think as people have gotten more familiar with it, and it's been less painful to like watch them go through interactions, it's gotten at least okay. Like I think the only areas where it really falters are like those weird interactions like Marnie and things like Great Ball, that like there's just a little more effortful. I don't know, like it takes more effort to do them than maybe I would like to see. But other than that, like I actually do enjoy watching it.
That's good. That's good. And you can tell, kind of what the cards are, and it's not like hard to read, I guess. I guess that would be for me the biggest thing, is like I get the comments where it's like, "Hey, could you, turn up the resolution on the tabletop?" But it's like, "No, that's about where it is like going to be." And you just, it's kind of blurry and things like that. I'm wondering how that is for you.
I don't know, like maybe I'm just familiar enough with the cards, but like
Yeah.
when I'm playing the game in real life, I look at the picture across from me. I don't read every single thing on my opponent's cards every single time. Like I just know what the card is.
Yeah.
When we go to Worlds, we look at the picture.
Right.
So like, I don't know. I don't see a problem.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting how, and I think that speaks to, going off on a little tangent, I think that speaks to how a lot of players can get, certain interactions wrong, or certain card text wrong, because a lot of it is just this eyesight, kind of looking at a card. You identify the picture, you identify the color, the look of it, and then you go from there, right? And you just, I assume that this does this, or I assume that this interacts with this in this way. And so, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think maybe that complaint is a little amplified because of the fact that we're working like with new format cards.
Sure,
So
sure,
like people might not have that level of familiarity. I think, by
right.
and large, there's not too many. Like, there's actually a decent amount of stuff in Darkness Ablaze, but there's not a lot of like crazy complicated stuff. And most of the
No.
stuff is like heavy hitter stuff that you've probably already seen. Like,
Yeah, I
probably
was gonna
the
say
most complicated card, I'm sure you would
yeah,
agree, is Eternatus.
yeah.
There's just a lot going on there.
That's that's a real funny one because I've been doing some tabletops over the last couple of weeks with Andrew, and that's probably the most like asked question in the chat is like someone will come in and one of us is playing Eternatus, and someone will say in the chat like, "What's with your bench? Like you're over bench." Like I'm like, no, it can fit up to 8. So
No, and we were having a really interesting conversation prior to the cast because we were trying. I was musing at the idea of Eternatus and like alternative ways to play it because I was at work today and I was walking to get food and I'm like,
Eternatus
I'd
doesn't
watched
mean
your video on
yeah,
YouTube
yeah.
about how like Eternatus is like overhyped slightly, and I'm like, yeah, man, there has to be like some way to play Eternatus that just no one has seen through the
Mhm.
glass yet or seen through the fog. And I'm walking around like, man, like couldn't Eternatus just be like an optimal 2-hit KO deck versus other big pokes? Like, if you can't get the 1-hit KO, Eternatus can always guarantee you 2-hit KO, which not every deck can boast that.
Right.
And obviously you can 1-hit KO like anything under 270.
Right.
And so I'm like thinking about this and thinking like, oh, I wish there was a way you could heal it and do all this kind of, crazy fun stuff. And you brought up Champions Festival. And so we look up Champions Festival. If you don't know what Champions Festival is, it's a Worlds promo. It's a stadium. And if you have a full bench plus your active Pokemon, then you can heal 10 on your board. That's what we knew the effect of Champions.
Heal 10 from all of your Pokemon.
Yeah. So that was what we had colloquially known the effect of Champions Festival to be. And this actually ties in like both kind of topics, like where we recognize like what the card generally does as opposed to its words and the complicated nature of Eternatus. So we're like, oh, maybe we can use that to heal. And we look up Champions Festival and it says if you have 6 Pokemon in play, then you can use it. And if you I guess you just can't use it with Eternatus because you have more than 6.
I mean, you could use it with Eternatus.
You just have to only have 5 bench.
You just have to have 6. Yeah.
It was just like that's so bizarre, and it's like I doubt they ever thought about that because there wasn't any precedent for a larger bench size ability. There was precedent for like smaller bench size abilities,
and then there was precedent for like expanding your bench with like Skyfield, for instance. But then if you have Skyfield in play, then you would never have Champions Festival in play.
Right. So it was just bizarre. Almost. It was just crazy. So I really liked learning that though.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Kind of Old and new worlds collide.
Long story short, I tried to think about a way to play Eternatus as more of a tanky 2-hit KO deck, and I guess we didn't really find anything fruitful.
But it's a good thing to consider. Like, yeah, I definitely, I put out that video kind of saying like the counters to Eternatus and why it isn't, maybe it's not going to be the deck that just absolutely runs over much of the format. Like it does have, it is a good deck. It is tier 1 in my opinion, but it's not like the one, it's not the BDIF. I think there are a lot of things that can go toe to toe with it. But you bring up another point is like, how will we see these lists evolve into the future and what will they look like? I mean, we have these really nice base lists. Andrew put out a very good base list of Eternatus. I think there are a lot of good base lists out there for many of the archetypes that come out of Darkness Ablaze, but how will we reimagine them as the format goes on? That's really exciting because we have this kind of initial thought. And then, you go and test that thought and, modify and change it up. And then we come out with a more developed format. And I think that's really now we're moving in. It almost feels, it's weird to say, like the set is what, 4 weeks away from dropping. And
it's 2 weeks from dropping.
Well, 4 weeks from being playable.
I guess, but like, what is playable, at this stage of the game?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is like, it's interesting. I feel like for this set, we have more already in the short time period, like we have more of a developed idea of what the format will look like in, so far, beyond, what am I trying to say? We have such a good idea of the format before the set even drops, like that we've had for any other format, I feel like.
I'd say yes and no. I mean, normally, on present day, we would normally be talking about the Worlds format, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like we put a lot of effort into our Worlds testing, at least last year. And I feel like we got it pretty close, besides the fact that we just didn't know Mewtwo was so good.
Well, it was interesting, though, because we kind of picked a meme to play at Worlds.
Well, it started as a meme. And it developed into something much greater. And honestly, I still stand by that if we knew what we were doing with that, we could have definitely done better.
Yeah, it's true. It's for sure true. It's for sure true.
It was still a little bit in the meme zone, but it was also like partially informed by what we thought the meta was going to look like, which was incorrect because we weren't factoring in the welder decks to the level that we should have.
Yeah, absolutely.
The non-greens welder decks, that is.
Absolutely.
So, whatever. Bygones be bygones. We're talking about Guardy, if you're not familiar. We played Gardevoir at Worlds last year. But what I'm saying is, like, I feel like tying this together, we had what we thought was a good sense of what the meta would look like, and it was correct for a large subset of players. But there was another subset of players which completely blew our minds, basically, about what we thought was realistic and possible for the format. We saw Pidgey, we saw like these Welder Mewtwo decks that were very straightforward and very strong, obviously won the tournament, and then we had like the Firebox decks, which obviously were a staple for the entire rest of the year. I guess what I'm ultimately saying is, don't count your chickens before they hatch, Mr. JW.
Well, for sure. And then, I mean, you look at our position too, and just being content creators and being kind of voices, and just saying like, we have to make decisions at certain points, right? So like, you have to make an opinion. You have to develop an opinion at this point. And so, yeah, of course. Like, I'm always open, and I've always said like, the early opinions are some of the most fluid, right? In the sense that they can change the most. But I think there are some things, some truths that have developed over the couple weeks that we've been doing tabletop and just theorizing on the new format. I think one of those things is that ADP is still very, very good. And we were talking about like it dominated 2 formats ago, and maybe wasn't as dominant this last format, although still had a very solid position in the metagame. But I think it comes back into prominence because of the lack of one prize attackers like Spiritomb and Baby Blacephalon. Like those are Baby Blacephalon, still a deck. Not saying that, no one will ever play Baby Blacephalon. And to an extent, I'm sure Spiritomb is a thing, but it's very obviously not the same deck that it once was. And so you look at the decline of those 2 decks, for me being the reason that ADP just vaults itself into arguably the best deck in the new format.
So obviously ADP remains as like a powerful force. It doesn't really lose anything, and the fact of the matter is doing 30 more damage and taking an extra prize when you have Zacians in your deck is just good. So that all follows, logically makes sense to me. In your experience, is there anything that really consistently stands up?
I mean, I think you can make a case for Eternatus, but the weakness there in Eternatus is that you're not quite on the same turn clock. Like you can't really guarantee wins in the same way that you can with ADP. The thing with ADP and the Eternatus matchup is that you don't even have to knock out an Eternatus. You don't even have to hit into an Eternatus to win the game. Like you can just dink around the Eternatus, go after 2 Crobats, and that's the game. And like we were kind of talking about, well, maybe there's a way for Eternatus to, not bench as many Crobats, but then at the point that you're not benching Crobats, you're not really getting the damage that you need to get out. So it's this kind of tightrope here. It's not to say like that Eternatus can't beat ADP, because it certainly can. I think that's the deck that goes toe to toe with it the best in the next format.
Yeah, I'm curious what kind of one prize solutions people will come with. I feel like people always start with these insane one prize decks, and we narrow them down to like some consistent masterpiece. I haven't really experimented with one prize, to be honest, in this format. Yeah. I've mostly looked at Eternatus as kind of like my kind of deck, fill your bench.
Sure.
Have a lot of
it's cool. It reminds me a lot of like honestly, like a Zoroark deck, like a Zoroark Skyfield deck.
Not quite the flavor that Zoroark had.
Sure.
Zoroark, that's just, like best flavor of all time. But it harkens to it at least. It gives you some of that satisfaction of hitting a lot of damage with a large
Yeah.
bench. Having a wide bench is kind of fun, like.
It is, man. Like when you're pushing your opponents to both sides, you're like, hey man, can I get a little extra room? I got to put another zigzagoon down.
Yeah, and the fact it's for a zigzagoon makes it better, for sure.
Right, there you go.
So, it all follows. It all makes sense to me.
Definitely does.
The
The other deck that I've been really impressed with in the early testing has been Decidueye. I think I knew Decidueye would be good to an extent, but kind of playing it as the essentially the Aggro deck that we all just wrecked regionals with. I think it has a lot of promise. Again, the one problem I would say with it is like it just has a hard time with ADP. You pretty much got to lay his Zacian down. You got to get, a couple of Decidueye out, and you're not doing enough damage quick enough to like take out the one prize threat that ADP could potentially play. So that to me feels like a deck that if you can figure out a tech or some way, some strategy to beat ADP, then that would be for sure like a top tier contender.
Yeah.
Right now, probably falls in that tier 2 category. But it's just something that I have been looking at and saying, this could actually work. This does have a lot more viability than maybe I initially thought. I thought it was going to be good. I didn't think it was going to be as good as it turns out it probably will be.
Yeah, honestly, my initial impressions of Decidueye were bad. I'm not going to lie. Like, the fact it was on a stage 2 to get this ability when we've had, similar decks on basic Pokemon to do this. And I didn't even like those decks.
Right.
So, the shift in dynamic there, and I don't really know what's pushing Decidueye that didn't push those other decks when they were quicker and more simple. But, I think the format is centered itself enough around these multi-prize Pokemon that it just makes it an easy contender,
Exactly. For sure.
So, not the kind of decks that I like, though. I hate playing this kind of decks, man. It really sucks when you just hit like a one prizer that just plows through you before you can do anything.
Definitely, man. I totally agree.
I don't know. I hate my strategy being like predicated on my opponent not being able to do anything.
I don't know.
Simple enough for some decks to include in. Not every deck.
It works a lot of the time, though, I gotta say.
Yeah. No, I just like the general strategy is never one that I've liked.
Oh,
it's
sure.
not so much like
you'll win with it. You'll play it if you felt like it was the best play for the tournament, but
right.
You would never default to it.
Yeah, I mean the only time I've really liked a deck like that was when I played the Vileplume deck.
Yeah, but you really liked that deck though. But that had a lot of thinking.
I put a lot of time into that deck, and it was very methodical, and it was also just like such an exceptionally obviously good play that it made sense to.
Well, and just so listeners know, you're talking about the colloquially named Wacky Smacky.
That's correct, yeah.
Which is a mill deck, stall deck, focusing around Regigigas, and has it was a 303 Vileplume or something like that.
It's
a little bit thicker. 202.
302.
Yeah. Oh, 302. Okay.
Yeah.
302 Vileplume line blocking the basics from attacking. So just kind of this wall deck that you could put up anything to respond to your opponents and just eventually mill them out.
So Sancho Villa brings up in chat, not to shift gears too hard from Vileplume, but Sancho Villa brings up an interesting point. If you're worried about any fighting decks in terms of Eternatus, the only one I've even seen like worth being time at all has been like, I don't know. Like,
say it. Say it.
Do I even give it a platform, bro?
What's that?
Do I even give it a platform?
Bro, say it.
I can't, man. I dove into the Passimian rabbit hole once, and
now clearly the deck that he's talking about is Excadrill.
True. True. Dude, Excadrill. That's more fun though.
No, yeah, Excadrill, but Phalanx.
Yeah, no, like, and I was actually a big Passimian stan, like, when the deck first became, like, a real thing. When Kevin Baxter played it to top 32, I had worked on that so hard with him heading into that tournament and just didn't play it. So I'm with you, Phalanx people who like are about that. Like I know the vibes.
Right.
I'm
right.
one with the vibes, but
Right.
jeez, man, those kind of decks just they're the worst.
They're pretty bad.
They feel so bad to play.
They are pretty bad.
They're awful, man. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you.
But in terms of being worried about any fighting decks, I mean, fighting at least right now until we have Colossal is not a tier 1 deck. It's simply relegated to being a counter deck solely based on having the weakness on Eternatus. And then again, I mean, Eternatus, like we have previously stated, isn't the catch-all best deck in the format, in my opinion. Maybe it turns into that. I don't think so. There are a lot of ways that can be countered and some bad matchups that are already kind of showing up in the testing. And
Right.
And so, fighting is only relevant because Eternatus is relevant, and Eternatus may not be like the best deck that we thought it would be, or a crazy BDIF or something like that. And so, unfortunately, fighting decks, I wouldn't worry. If Eternatus becomes insane, if some build comes out, or we just find that, hey, Eternatus is actually the best deck after more testing, more reps, you can always include weakness guard energy.
Right. It fits in right into that colorless energy slot.
Yeah, so it really isn't that big of a like. There is a counter that Eternatus has to these fighting decks, and again, that's not like a perfect counter, but in the sense that you could always whiff the energy attachments or not have it on the right Pokemon, or they could gust around it. But there is that answer that you can play that should help you in a fighting matchup.
Yeah, it's just my kind of logic, and it's almost like the same reason I don't like playing the counter-ish decks like the Hoopas and the Decidueyes is the same reason I don't like playing these like weird weakness decks. It's like you're trying to do one thing, right? And if your opponent has a way around that thing, or you don't hit the right matchups, like what's even the point?
Yeah.
And none of the fighting decks I don't think are stand up well enough on their own to justify playing them. And it harkens back to Passimian again. Like if Passimian truly wasn't a viable deck when Zoroark dominated the entire format, why would now Phalanx be a deck when we're not sure that Eternatus is even the best deck?
Right. Right. And I mean, and you look at Phalanx too, like it has less tools, I feel like, than Passimian had in terms of search,
like counterattackers
and things like that. Right. So it's really just, it's kind of this one track mind that I'm not really seeing having a lot of other good matchups outside of like maybe peek around, but obviously we're talking about next format, so lightning isn't a factor either. So I think you could make an argument for Phalanx in the kind of the Worlds format, or the Lost format, where it's Ultra Prism to Darkness Ablaze. You could maybe make a case for Phalanx, but beyond that, it's hard to say that that will be much of a factor.
Has anyone like in chat put any credence into the Lost format, the TCGO format, for like two weeks?
Well, I mean, there are going to be tournaments run in that format outside of
like some grassroots ones.
Yeah, grassroots tournaments. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
yeah, I mean that is going to be like the TCGO standard as well for 2 weeks, I think. Right.
It'll be fun. I'm really looking forward to Vikavolt actually.
Yeah.
Because that to me, like Vikavolt, I think is going to have a hard time without something like Thunder Mountain or something like Counter Gain. And I think if it has, some way to make it so that you're only attacking for one energy, that's kind of what it needs. Vikavolt still feels like it has a place in the post-rotation format, but unfortunately losing Thunder Mountain, I think, is too big of a loss for Vikavolt to be like a top tier, probably a tier 2 deck is a Vikavolt in post rotation, but losing out on that one energy attack possibility is huge for that deck.
Yeah. If only there was a way to attach 2 energy with a single attachment.
Man, if only.
Can you imagine such a thing?
That would just be actually just a broken card. I feel like that should never be printed.
Yeah, that would totally imbalance cards that are.
Well, yeah, right.
Attached.
Yeah, or if they made something like that, maybe it just goes away after the turn is done. Or it's like only limited to certain Pokemon, maybe not the most powerful ones.
Yeah, they'd have to do something like that, right?
Yeah, I think they would have to, right, to make it a balanced card. So anyway, we'll get back to the dev team on that one.
I was never in team DCE is inherently broken. I was on team the cards that had DCE cost were broken.
Yeah.
I still think
I was
true.
there too. Yeah,
Like,
I was there too. I was more of a fan of banning Skyfield,
no,
honestly.
I mean, like, no,
But
obviously
like
none of them are bad.
Seismitoad too. I mean, right? Yeah, you look at Seismitoad or like even Laser. Like I feel like Seismitoad without Laser isn't that bad. I mean, we look at it here in the future format where you have Vikavolt, the 7-shotting an Eternatus, or 7-shotting pretty much any other VMAX.
Right, and at the
That
time,
seems,
Seismitoad was 6-shot usually.
yeah, 6-shot generally, or if it had like a Fighting Fury Belt and Laser. I mean,
5-shot.
the math gets a little bit funky, and Verbank, and there's some other factors that you can consider there. But yeah, there's no real good. I guess you could play Vitality Band and the Vikavolt and that, and then you got Zigzag. Okay, I digress. But it's a lot easier for Seismitoad to hit, get cleaner knockouts than it is for Vikavolt.
Right.
On these big Pokemon.
Yeah, when it comes to DCE, my like thought, and I'm sure this was the balance team's thought, was like, it's a good way to bridge an attack that's too powerful for 1 basic energy, but too weak for 2 basic energy.
Yeah.
And I just think ultimately, like, they didn't hit that middle ground quite right, where the attacks for DCE were just way too good to justify not doing it.
Right. Right.
So, maybe one day DCE comes back. Had a glorious run.
Right. Exactly. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I think now is the time we can open up the floor to any viewer questions. If you guys have any questions,
We did want to talk about one other thing today.
Yeah, of course.
We did want to talk about our experiences in Tabletop Simulator with the cubes.
Yes. Now the cubes are something very cool. I haven't actually participated in one. Tonight will be the first time. I'm hoping that everyone will be cool with me streaming it, because I think I'd like to show how a cube can work in this format. Other people have streamed it, but it's certainly, cubing in real life is like one of the best ways to enjoy Pokemon, in my personal opinion, because there's a camaraderie to it that I don't know, you don't really get in any other situation. Like everyone, it's lower stakes than a tournament, because I think camaraderie is there in tournaments, but the problem with tournaments is that not everyone's going to do well. So some people are going to be salty. Some people are going to be upset or frustrated that they misplayed or something like that. But then in a cube, it's so low stakes that everybody is just enjoying Pokemon in its purest form, and that is one of the greatest things about cubes.
Yeah, I love like the drafting phase and like talking trash on all your friends, and just
ripping your shirt off after like 10 consecutive baby flips and flinging it around in the air, running up and
something
down the
like
house.
something like that. I don't know who would do something crazy like that, but I've enjoyed them. What's cool about Tabletop Sim is there are some plugins which are I don't have to make them, like someone else has already made them, where you can like automatically pass the hands around, and like building the deck isn't too bad. And I had that experience even before I played the cube, because I was playing Bunny Kingdom on Tabletop Sim.
Oh, okay.
And that's also a drafting game, and they had the same like pass the hand around button.
Yeah.
So I think actually it systematically works pretty well, as long as you have a group that as a whole understands Tabletop Sim. Because one person really controls, the slowest person in a cube controls the pace of the cube. Of the entire group. So, having everyone on the same page as far as like readiness is obviously key. But once you get that narrowed down, it's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It's good. It's good. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. And what's cool is like it's really easy to dynamically update a cube with any card.
Yeah, because that's one of the things too, is like with the physical cubes, you might have overpowered cards, but then you're like, well, if I want to play this again and buff up this typing or buff up this archetype, like I'm gonna have to wait a little while to like order the cards, and you might not have the things that you need on hand. But with a cube in Tabletop Simulator, just go, hey, I want more of this card, clone it, boom, it's there. It's immediately there. That's very cool.
yeah, it lets you have really dynamic ability to change things and alter things and rebalance types, and I like that a lot. It's like a good medium to experiment as well. Like even in a future state where everyone's back to normal, like maybe you're thinking about doing a cube. This is a great way to test it out and see if like it's balanced or if you need to rethink things, because they get expensive too, especially if you're doing older formats.
Oh,
Like
for sure.
these cards get really expensive over time, so you don't want to
Yeah,
drop money on an archetype that just doesn't work.
right, right. And that's also another thing too, is like if you are thinking about getting into cubes, like start as soon as possible would be my would be my advice, because the longer you wait, I mean, we're just seeing the card prices go insanely high. Like
Yeah.
I never thought, some of these primes would get over 10 or 15 bucks, but here they are, and it's absolutely insane. Some of these literally unplayable cards, like never saw a single tournament play in their entire lifetimes, like are now skyrocketing.
Yeah, Light
It's
Dragonite
insane.
just went over $100 or something. Like
Which one?
Light Dragonite's over $100.
Light Dragonite is $100.
More than that.
Unbelievable.
They're listed. So, this is important eBay trick. If you're ever on eBay, the listing price isn't necessarily the value of a card. You want to look at like the recent sales, and so they have sold from anywhere from like $100 to $180 in the last couple days.
Wow, that's crazy, man.
Yeah.
And like somebody like Andrew, like he has like 4 or something in his cube, something like that, where he probably picked them up for 10 or 15 a piece. But just looking at it, like the card prices have gone absolutely insane. Like the primes I've been looking at.
Yeah, I don't know what's really spurred it on either. I feel like this is almost a weird time to get into it.
Yeah, it just seems like new money is coming into the game somehow.
Maybe people are like bored at home and just want to collect, or
well, and I also feel like big money is coming into the game. We've had some big movers and shakers in the Pokemon community, but certainly not, and maybe this could be how clueless I am, but certainly not like millionaires, which I almost feel like at this point there has to be some guy that just has so much money that he has no idea what to do with. He's literally buying up everything. That's what it feels like, because these cards that shouldn't be as expensive as they are super boosted in price. Like not even just like, oh, I'm noticing a difference. Like they're inflating by 2, 3, 4, 5 times what they were worth not even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely absurd. So yeah, I mean, to bring it back to the cube, like if you want to start a cube with older format cards, either do it in Tabletop Simulator, because like Riley said, that's a good way to test and figure out like what you actually want to buy. But if you're thinking about doing something, I would just start now, because those old cards are not going to go down anytime soon. I mean, there is a bubble. There is bubble speculation. That's a whole nother podcast. There is bubble speculation on the price of cards, but at least for now, for the foreseeable future, they should, and they definitely won't go down to where they were, a year ago or 2 years ago. So certainly get in now if you're interested in making a cube.
Yeah, awesome points. And who knows, maybe the investment podcast is coming next.
Cool.
Let's jump into the chat questions here. I see a couple already. Guy Kid 121 asking, will Blounds be good post rotation? JW, thoughts?
Blounds is fine. Anytime that you're looking at a one prize attacker that can one shot anything, I think that has like an inherent amount of value in in a format. In terms of like, we're just seeing the HP go to a scale that we've never seen before, but at least there's kind of this check, in some way that we have in our Baby Blacephalon. And so I wish that it had one more buff. It loses Heat Factory. It loses primarily the Fire Crystal. I wish it just had that one, or not Fire Crystal, Fiery Flint.
Right, the Flint.
I wish it just had that one extra buff, like Fiery Flint was back, or like even Professor's Letter, just to give it a little bit more, because right now it doesn't feel like it has enough. You're going to lose to a late game N, or a late game Reset Stamp, or a late game Marnie, way harder than you did in formats past. And so that is the most concerning thing to me about Baby Blacephalon. Awesome deck, should be, viable, but it won't sniff tier 1 without some kind of buff.
Yeah, I agree. I think the hardest part is having like a low hand cost way to get a lot of energy to your hand. Um, you know, the giant hearth is not quite as effective as having a fiery flint, and so the deck is a little bit stifled in its way to get out of the gates
Yeah.
initially, and then also to keep it going. Um,
Yeah.
and so it's just it that's like a major loss is the flint, honestly.
Yeah.
Like every time I've played the deck, I've loved having flints in my hands. I love drawing them. I love continuing to draw them. Like
Sure.
early, mid, late, it's just a good card. So
Sure. Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
the deck still has the tools. If you can get energy into the discard, like you still have the ways to
Yeah.
cycle them over and over. It's just
Yeah,
that
yeah.
initial...
I mean, for sure. And like Guy Kid says, Lucky Egg and like Spinner for getting energy out. Like Spinner is good. Don't get me wrong there. But like the best case of Spinner is to use it on the second turn. But since you're a lot slower, you're never really using Spinner to like its full effect. Like you
right,
often
like you're
get
not
that
going to
hand
get that many
disrupted.
spinners as well.
Right.
Like not even thinking about like late game not being a good card to draw. Like I'd rather draw an energy almost than a spinner.
Yeah, in certain cases for sure.
You know, it's just like, why am I playing a spinner when I could just have an energy at that point? You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
like, you know, the turn 2 value. If you're just thinking about, you know, maybe you go second and just try to get an explosive turn 2. You know, what are you gonna draw like 3 spinners? Like, okay.
Right.
You know, if you do, then you know you really freaking played
Props.
that one well, man.
For sure.
You know,
For sure. The
you
late
have
game,
one welder and you draw 3 spinners.
yeah, yeah. The late game with Blounce is very different now because you rely solely on your fire crystals to get you those one hit KO numbers. So you need to have enough fire crystals left in the deck to achieve, you know, against VMAX decks 2 one shots. Which isn't always that viable because in the early game, you know, you might have to discard one, like try to go for a Dedenne, or you maybe have used one in the early game to try to get something set. It just is a lot better in theory than I think it is in practice. And I think we'll see that play out. Blounce, not dead. Again, not saying it's horrible, not saying it's unplayable,
Right.
just saying it's not as good as it was.
Which is, I mean, it's natural.
Which is pretty obvious, I guess. Yeah.
You know, fits in, makes sense.
Yeah.
Merciless asking any thoughts on Aggron with the sturdy ability. And sturdy ability is another one that I've never been a fan of. Just like the blocking.
I think you look at a sturdy ability being something that's okay. We saw it with, I think Donphan was the card in like Lost Thunder or something.
The game has changed since then in the fact that we have a lot of decks playing Scoop Up Next and Zigzagoon.
Yes, and I was just gonna say there's that, and then there's also a problem with Aggron being not only being a stage 2, making it just a little bit harder to get out than Donphan, but also the problem that you don't have a healing mechanic that will heal 150 damage consistently. We had last chance potion,
Right.
which is very good for Donphan because Donphan had like 120 or 130 health, and so last chance potion just healed it all the way to full. So you look at that like, oh, that's a good combo, like that actually works. But like with Donphan or with Aggron, you would need to get a last chance potion
and a potion,
and then like a Mallow and Lana, or like a last chance potion and then a potion, and it just that extra combo is what's gonna, you know, if it wasn't good already, like that extra bit of combo isn't gonna help.
What set did last chance potion come in?
Couldn't tell you, man.
I don't know either.
I guess I'll look it up here. You can address the next question.
What is the next question?
Or is there not a next question? Oh, Celestial Storm.
Celestial Storm. Who would have thought?
Sayonara.
Sayonara. Man, Celestial Storm was such an underwhelming set, man. It had last chance potion in it.
Bruh. Last chance potion. Top tier contender. I didn't even know Last Chance Potion has like, it has 2 Dunsparce on it. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, it has 2 Dunsparce on the sides. Huh.
You learn something new every day.
You sure do.
One last question from Nikhil in chat. Any thoughts on the Hoopa deck? Does it still lack Guzma, and does that prevent it from being good?
I think you actually have enough switch with the Hide Energy and the Air Balloon that it's probably fine. The problem with Hoopa is that the damage output just lacks a little bit. with Zapdos, the reason that Zapdos was, very strong in like a tier 1 deck is because the HP was a little less back then. You weren't looking at, VMAX Pokemon. And then you also had the additional damage buff of Electro Power. And so that's not to say like Hoopa is bad. I think it is a good card, but I don't think it can be a deck on its own because it's going to need some like additional damage. Now, maybe there's a way to do like Hoopa plus like Sableye or something as that backup sweeper. But just doing 90 damage turn after turn isn't gonna do it for you, I think, in the long run, especially against these massive VMAXs.
Right. Yeah, how I would frame it is, Zapdos as a deck had two things that really were going for it. The first was Guzma, which was ridiculous. The second one was it threatened a 2-hit KO or a 1-hit KO on everything. Pokemon were smaller back then. 80 damage itself was already good. And then, taking the next step from that is you threatened that KO, even a 1-hit KO on a lot of Pokemon. So I think losing the guaranteed Gust plus Switch obviously hurts any deck with that strategy of pivoting around and doing damage by virtue of pivoting.
Sure.
But then, just like GW said, the damage output being so threatened by the Electro Power not existing for Dark types, nor should it.
Right. Sure.
That it's not an archetype that I would pursue.
I mean, it'll be fine. Again, it feels a lot like a Baby Blacephalon deck, like just not quite there, but maybe someone, Nikhil's bringing up Galarian.
And, maybe that's the state of one prize decks right now. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to figure out, and again, this is the exciting time. So we kind of have this framework that's been built. The foundation for the format has been built. A lot of good lists have been coming out, and now we get to build upon that and see what can stand a chance.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how everything pans out. Lord knows we get surprised all the time with how people might approach a format. So I'm excited to see what surprising things come out of this, what developments we get over the next few weeks, and what you all from chat come up with. So wanted to extend a hearty thanks to everyone in chat today. Want to thank Andrew Mahone and Azul Garcia Griego for the raids. We appreciate all you coming from those channels. And we will certainly be catching y'all next week. Peace.
See ya.